guys, welcome to another episode of Alex and DJ Watch a Doc. I'm DJ, coming to you from a beautiful hotel room in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and from sunny Los Angeles, California, we've got Mr. Alex Nussbaum.
I'm Alex in front of vegetation.
And today we are talking about a documentary we just watched directed by Mr. Oliver Stone, and it is called JFK Revisited Through the Looking Glass, and it just came out, and it's just, going over the events of November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated with some new evidence. And it was a lot.
Yeah, there was they went over it again.
Okay, my first question for you, Alex, let's get right into it. Let's not beat around the bush, okay? After watching this, did Lee Harvey Oswald kill the president? And if he did he act alone? How do you feel after watching this doc?
Well, I'm not glad you asked, DJ. This is a topic that has plagued the generations. And I don't know,
Do you lean either way, or do you care?
Do I lean either way?
Yeah.
I lean towards not actually knowing, and I lean towards knowing a lot of people have opinions, and I lean towards a lot of people who have opinions, I don't know where they get their information from, and some people who get their information from maybe better sources perhaps weren't in this documentary. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to dabble. Because this is a very conspiracy theory kind of, this is one of the deepest rabbit holes you can go down. Probably this and the moon landing and maybe 9/11 in recent memory. So I'm going to go down that rabbit hole, and I'm going to engage, and I'm going to say, based on this doc and what I've been reading after, I just don't think there's any way he acted alone. I believe he might have done it, but the whole magic bullet theory, the fact that it went through Kennedy, Governor Connolly, and then the difference in trajectory, everything about it. The fact that, Jack Ruby, who killed him, was a CIA informant. The fact that Oswald was on their list as well, CIA and FBI. And he had just visited Mexico City right before. They didn't even mention it in the doc. And he was meeting with Cubans. I don't know. There's just so much that the Warren Commission didn't reveal, and I think they never would have to reveal. And obviously the Zapruder film coming out 12 years later. I think it was a massive cover-up that failed. I just don't know what the cover-up is. It didn't fail because I don't know what the cover-up is, so I guess it succeeded. So I guess I'm saying the same thing as you. I don't know, but I think there's some shady business going on.
Right. Do you, here, I have a follow-up question. You seem to be drawn to these documentaries. Do you think this podcast is plotting your journey away from being taken in by misinformation and disinformation presented in seductive ways?
Wait a minute. You think I'm drawn to these types of documentaries? This is the first kind of doc I've done like this.
No, but like documentaries that present strong cases that when you start to delve further into it, you realize, oh, this is not actually as cut and dry as they make it out to seem.
Well, I agree with you that it's not cut and dry. So if you're insinuating that I'm going down the rabbit hole a little bit too much here, I'm still here. I still got my logical, pragmatic brain. So I don't think so, but I am drawn to it for sure. But I think I'm, a huge part of the population is too. John F. Kennedy was murdered, and it forever altered the direction of the country and the world. That's a pretty compelling documentary.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a compelling subject because apparently by 2013, here's a quote: an estimated 40,000 books about JFK has been published since his death, and that was in 2013. And this anniversary year has loosed another vast outpouring. So there's a lot about it, a lot that people talk about it. I just feel like, I don't know, there are other things in this world that need to be dealt with as opposed to something like that from so long ago. And also just, just the misinformation. It just seems to, it's like we're dealing with more and more of this like QAnon kind of way of thinking. Don't we really need to get away from it rather than, I don't know, Oliver Stone, here's a question. Did he, Did he look for contrarians? He considered himself a contrarian, but did he look for people who were contrary to that opinion in the documentary, or was he only looking for people who said author of a book, and what are their credentials?
Well, I think the contrarian opinion was put forward by the powers that be, the CIA. I think the whole reason for this interest in it is because of people being lied to. And this was one of the first major examples of the American population realizing, this is at the same time as the Vietnam War. All of this was kind of wrapped up in the same sort of feeling of maybe the American government doesn't have our best interests at heart. So I think that the thread that you're pulling here with the QAnon, and this isn't my own thought, I was reading an article about it, that like QAnon is like, that thread goes all the way back to Kennedy, even though it's kind of on the opposite side of the conspiracy ledger, if you will. It's like born out of a mistrust of the powers that control America and the world. So I think it's so interesting because it really makes you feel like a pawn in some overall scheme that we can't put our finger on, which is compelling and terrifying. Okay,
well, I'm going to follow up with another question.
Okay.
I'm really coming at it. Yeah, I'm hitting you.
Come at me.
Come
at me, bro.
I'm coming at you with bro. I'm coming at you like a bro. Because you mentioned an article. We both read this Rolling Stone article.
Yeah.
Right?
That totally debunked this movie. It was not a fan of Oliver Stone.
That's right. And so one of the things that were brought up in it, and this is what I ask you, do you think this was concocted by the Russians who continue to sow division? And then again, I'm going to flip it once again and say, how do we know the Rolling Stone article wasn't written by someone trying to discredit the actual facts that Oliver Stone are trying?
I mean, that's the thing.
It goes back and forth. You can't win in these situations.
What was the Russian term for disinformation that they invented in the 50s? Do you remember? It was like, I want to hear you say it if you remember it. It was a really great Russian.
It was some Russian word, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your famed
You think
accent.
I remember a Russian word off the top of my head?
It was like disinformatica or something.
You know what? I'm not your Russian dancing monkey. I want to hear you say it.
It could have... Say it for me, Alex. Say it. It could have been the Russians. I mean, they were putting forward the kind of theory. What did the Rolling Stone article say? They were the first one to put it out there that it was a CIA-backed plot, and then a bunch of media outlets ran with it around the world.
Yeah, they kind of they strike a match kind of thing, and then they start a fire, and then they blow the smoke around the world. That's kind of how they put it.
Isn't that crazy that we know about what the Russians did now in 2016 during the election and everything? And it just makes you realize this isn't new. This goes back decades, generations.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying, like, we don't know what... I don't know. Like, I feel like Oliver Stone is like, was this a good documentary? I mean, it just took... He talked about one specific... He's got a hard-on for that CIA conspiracy. It's all about the CIA. Well, let me ask you this. What about the mob? What about Jack Ruby? How come he's not talking so much about Jack Ruby? You know why? Because probably he's connected and he doesn't want to... Anyway. See, I can do this. We can do this all day.
He did leave out the mob stuff. He didn't talk about Jack Ruby. Another thing he conveniently left out that I had no idea, Lee Harvey Oswald killed a police officer in Dallas right after the assassination of JFK, an officer who came up to question him. He murdered a cop that day.
So what about that?
There was no mention of it. I had to research that to find out. Did you know that?
He's a cop killer.
Yeah.
Maybe let's call him a cop killer.
Yeah, I mean that he is a definite cop killer. We don't know if he's a patsy in the JFK scheme, but he murdered a cop that day.
He could do a gangster rap.
Oliver Stone definitely has a hard-on for taking down the CIA and the FBI. But here's a question for you. I mean, it's a very open-ended, not open-ended, but what's a leading question, I should say. Is anybody more evil in the history of any film footage than Dulles, the head of the CIA at that time, being asked a question where they're like, have you ever... what's the exact question he asks him? I want to make sure I get it right.
Responsible for somebody's death or something?
Yeah, he's like, have you... I don't know the exact quote, but it was violence. It wasn't death, but it was like, have you ever enacted violence against somebody? And he doesn't answer right away. He's lighting his pipe. And then he smokes his pipe, and then he just goes, no. You're like, you've murdered a million people. Like
smugly. It was a smug no too. You could see it was a bit of come on. You know, who are you talking to?
What are you gonna do about it?
What are you gonna do about it? Yeah.
I mean, my actual question for you though is, it's something I learned about this is, you know, we think of Kennedy as like he was young, he was a very youthful breath of fresh air in terms of presidency and leading America into the next kind of, you know, civil rights. He was young. That was like what Kennedy was, right? He represented hope. I think he was 43 when he was assassinated. He had crazy health problems. And when he was, like his whole life, he had colitis. When he had, and you know, he was such a great orator and author and all these sorts of things. And I found a letter that he wrote to a classmate, a friend, when he was in college dealing with health issues. And he said, he wrote this to his friend. He said, "God, what a beating I'm taking. I've lost 8 pounds and still going down." He wrote this during the summer of 1934 while tests were underway. He said, "Yesterday I went through the most harassing experience of my life. An iron tube 12 inches long and 1 inch in diameter up my ass. My poor bedraggled rectum is looking at me very reproachfully these days." Even a wordsmith, even when talking about an iron thing being shoved up his ass. My poor bedraggled rectum is looking at me very reproachfully. That's a nice way of saying my ass hurts like a bitch.
Yeah, and also ain't too happy with me.
Yeah. And here's the thing I was leading up to. He had terrible back problems. He was wearing a back brace that day when he was shot.
I remember this.
So there's speculation that after he got hit the first time, he wasn't able to lean down to take cover because of how, you know, structured that corset was, essentially the back brace that was keeping him upright, which is a crazy thing to think. He might have been able to save himself if he didn't have those terrible back issues.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's a who knows. Let me ask you. By the way, colitis. I just realized. I have friends who have it. Very Jewish thing.
Is it?
Jews have these issues. As it's colloquial put in Yiddish, the tsuris mit de kishkes.
What's that?
Means problems troubles with the guts.
Why do Jewish people have these gastrointestinal issues?
Because we're constantly anxious. The gnashing of the teeth. Anyway, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in any kind of dramatization involving as its subject the assassination of JFK, possibly starring James Franco?
Have I ever been in an adaptation?
Probably not, huh? But I have. Want to see a clip?
Sure. Was this the one, like the Stephen King novel that they made into? You were in it?
Yeah.
And I read that book that it's based on.
Did you read the book?
Yeah. Yeah, I read it over.
You?
Yeah, it was a great book. It was like a time traveling book.
Yeah, that's right. Perhaps you remember this part.
Stop! Stop now! Stop!
Please. Jake?
What's the matter with you? Look, we have to stop this surgery.
What's going on?
Please.
Here's the kicker. This is pre-COVID, and I was in a mask. You don't see my face, but that's me.
That's you
me.
in the mask.
About to perform surgery. That's me. That's
wow. I did not know.
Dr. Gelber or something like that. Yeah, that was me.
Wow. So I got to watch that again. Let me see that ever so briefly.
Stop! Stop now! Stop!
Please. Jake?
What's the matter with you? Look, we have to stop this surgery.
What's going on?
Please.
Oh, man. There it is. I recognize that posture. That's you.
Stop. There he is.
Wow, that's great. Wow, cool.
Yeah. So that
You're
was
involved.
I was involved, and I was at the time I was an anti-masker, but they insisted me wearing a mask. So yeah, that was an excuse for me to show you a clip where I was playing opposite James Franco.
I love it. I didn't know you were in that. I'm happy you shared it.
Yep.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to give you a little preamble with it because I had to make sense of what Oliver Stone was even trying to say with this part, and then I found something that summed it up nicely. Okay, so you know the magic bullet theory? that he gets into. And it was first posited by Arlen Specter, who was on the Warren Commission, which, by the way, is also bullshit. The fact that it was all big government guys on the Warren Commission, no independent jury, and somebody from the CIA, Dulles, was on it. That's why there's so many conspiracy theories, because it was not the way it should have happened. But here's the magic bullet theory in summary. So because the two victims in Dealey Plaza, President Kennedy and Governor John Connally, had suffered so many wounds, 8 in all, it had originally seemed as if more than 2 slugs from the supposed sniper's nest would have been necessary to explain all the damage. In addition, a home movie taken by a bystander, the Zapruder film, showed that too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired, reacquired his target, and fired again. The single bullet theory neatly solved both problems. It posited that a single, nearly whole bullet that was later recovered had caused all 7 of the non-fatal wounds sustained by both men. No fucking way, right? Like, they've done ballistics tests and everything, and I know some people said, no, it could have worked out that way, but doesn't that seem so far-fetched? Oh, and Connally and his wife, who was also in the car, both vehemently disagree with it. They say there's no way that it was the same bullet. Just, that's not the way the timing worked out.
Okay.
So, isn't that right there, like, the basis for, okay, we're being lied to? Like, is that not compelling enough for you to understand why people feel the urge, the need to get to the bottom of this?
Well, that's the problem I have with. See, the problem with anything that's one-sided is that I want to hear different sides, opposing sides. It's almost better to have a debate between very informed people. You know, for example, coming back to this article again, if we had, he didn't necessarily talk about the magic. Like he debunked certain aspects of the argument, but then there's still other aspects that are still open. Like you're bringing it up, right? But, you know, for example, I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Okay. Which
is another way of me wanting to ask another question. Do you believe in the grassy knoll shooter?
Well, he didn't get into that at all in the documentary. So I actually didn't learn too much about it in my further research, other than the fact that, like, if there was a second shooter, that's where they would have been. But I don't know enough about what they say the timing was, because I was reading some stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you should go ahead. Because I do have a follow-up, but you should go ahead.
I was just reading something about, like, when they think each bullet hit frame by frame in the Zapruder film, and that's a big reason why the magic bullet theory is so hotly contested, because the timing doesn't add up from the way that Connally and Kennedy reacted when they were getting hit, because if it had been the single bullet, then you would have seen them react almost at the same time, and there's too big of a gap. So I don't know if there is a grassy knoll shooter at what point. What of the 3 bullets came from the grassy knoll? The one that hit Kennedy in the head? Is that the theory?
Yeah, right. The one, it really comes back to the back and to the left of his head moving. Mm-hmm. Back and to the left. We also saw that parodied on Seinfeld. Back and to the left.
The eye test looks like his head is being blown out from the back, and it seems to me that the CIA and FBI didn't think anybody would ever see footage, and so they crafted a narrative and then had to come up with this magic bullet theory to fit that narrative. And even when Jacqueline climbs, by the way, the Zapruder film is so hard to watch. Like, they showed it multiple times in this documentary, and I know at this point it's like, you know, it's a part of our culture. We've seen it, most of us, but still, seeing a man die that many times in a row is hard to watch, Kennedy or otherwise.
It is.
But she climbs on the back, and I always thought she was kind of going for cover, but then it looks like she's grabbing a piece of his brain. That's what Oliver Stone said in his narrating, or maybe it was Whoopi, or maybe it was Donald Sutherland. It was a very eclectic mix of narrators here. But
yeah, what's Whoopi doing there? That was one of my questions.
I know, but if it came from the back, why would his brain have flown out the back? That seems like a exit wound type of behavior for the brain to fly out with the bullet.
She was grabbing the brain. It's a funny thing, is what you do when you're under panic stress situations. I better get that brain in case we can sew it back on.
Yeah, exactly. Doctors might need this. I think that was the presidential part of his brain.
Yeah, right.
And they had just lost their son Patrick a few months earlier to I think sudden infant like something. He was very young, and then this was one of their first public appearances, her first public appearances since then. Then she loses her husband, and then she has to swear in Lyndon B. Johnson wearing the same outfit. She like right after, like she went through hell. The poise she showed, poor lady, man, poor lady.
Poor lady. Yeah. She seems sweet too. You know, a sweet, gentle soul over there. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I know what you're saying.
And then Lee Harvey Oswald having to run down the stairs, and the two women saying they were in the stairwell, they didn't see him. It would have been the same time. Them changing the report to say they actually came a bit later so that there was no conflict. They didn't interview. I know this is all coming from Oliver Stone, so it is one source. I understand that. But if we're just
all over Stone and all over the place, but I would suggest that I don't know what to believe. Look, I don't know. I don't know about the grassy knoll. I don't know. Look, I don't even know if the grassy knoll would be a good name for a weed dispensary if I wanted to open one up. I don't know if that's the case. But as it turns out, it's already been done. I Googled it, and it's in Muskegon, believe it or not. The grassy knoll. You can go get your CBD product.
It's in Muskegon, Michigan?
Yes.
What a callback to last episode. Wow.
That's right. Right. Wow. Yes, last episode with the tickle cell capital of the U.S., Muskegon. Michigan.
My goodness.
Yeah, anyway, free plug for the grassy knoll.
That sounds like
also in Grand Rapids.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway,
grassy knoll. That dispensary sounds like all the weed would give you a lot of paranoia. That's not the kind of weed I want to be smoking. Where it just turns you
I would
into
suggest that it's
mind
blowing.
Mind blowing, dear Lord. Okay. Here's my final question for you, Alex. In a 2018 interview with the Washington Post, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father was also assassinated shortly after his uncle was assassinated, he had a meeting with his father's killer, Sirhan Sirhan. I think that's how you say his name, who's still alive and who's up for parole right now for, I think, the 26th time. And he might get it, the closest he's ever come. Because usually they've just shut it down right away, but this is the first time that the state of California hasn't denied the request outright, from what I read. And he had a meeting, and he said it was a very heartfelt meeting, an emotional meeting with his father's killer. And he came out of that saying he doesn't think that Sirhan acted alone in killing his father, and he thinks there was a broad conspiracy to kill both his father and his uncle. And obviously he's emotionally invested. This is his family that was murdered, and I know that's a factor in it, but he's also in power himself, and he's not some whack job, you know, as far as I know. So what do you make of that when somebody who's that close to the situation, who's probably privy to a lot more details than we are, doesn't believe that it was just, you know, a one-man job in either of the murders? Does that sway you at all?
I don't know what to make of all these things, you know? I don't know what being swayed means. Like, I don't know. It's just, I guess if I was on a jury, then I have to make some real decisions, but then I would have like all certain kinds of facts, and I'd have to, but it's just too much, and coming from too many different directions that I feel like
the bullets.
All I'm doing is I'm adding to the noise.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the noise is helping us right now. I think it's time that we stop with so much noise and start getting to the real important tasks at hand. Let's harken back to Greta and see if she has something to say about this.
But here's the thing. I totally agree with you, and I know we live in a culture filled with too much noise right now. But how do you heal without answers? And I'm talking as a country right now. That was a huge wound on the psyche of America, and we never got the real answers. I'm speaking as somebody who lives in America now, but you know, I obviously didn't live through it like the Americans who were alive at that time. But it was a huge wound on the psyche of real people who lived, who watched it live, who watched it on TV, who remember where they were, all these sorts of things. So yes, there are more important things, but he was trying to do important things, JFK. He was trying to not go to Vietnam. He was trying to not send troops to Bay of Pigs. He was involved in civil rights. And then his body, you know, his life was snatched from him. So is it not important, not to deal in conspiracies and to operate out of bad faith, but is it not important to try to, you know, figure out exactly what happened that took a a leader away from us?
What we're dealing with is the potential of what he could have done based on what we think that people are telling us that he said he wanted to do. And also there's this idea of like a death of hope, that there was this hope that that everything would have gone right. If he would just stayed alive, we would have had world peace and everybody would have gotten along and there'd be peace in the Middle East and all that sort of thing. Is that a fact? We don't know. We don't know we don't know. All we know is what did happen, and we don't know exactly how it happened. And really, I mean, you're asking me, how do we move forward? We just do. Like, I mean, I don't know. Can I move on with my day without having knowledge, without having this solved? Yeah, I think I can. Can we maybe put the effort that people put in going through every record to get this straight, if they put that same energy into figuring out a way to like maybe divert funds from military into things that help community, healthcare, and the planet, then maybe that would be a better use of time than obsessing over something that's been obsessed over for this many decades. Yeah. How about that?
Agreed. Except they said they were going to release all these documents. Trump said he was going to do it. He released some. He didn't release all. Biden said he was going to release more, the rest of them. And then Biden retracted that when everybody thought he was for sure. Like, they were like, Biden definitely going to do this because he said he would. So there's still documents that haven't come out that only add fuel to the fire. So I agree with you. There are more important things. But then give us everything on this so we can move on. I'm going to make a real personal example here.
It's hilarious. Your response to me is hilarious. Your response to me, it's like, how can we stop making it stink like shit in this room? And I say, well, maybe if you stop smearing shit on the wall, that might stop. Yeah, but sure. But you see this corner here? It still doesn't have shit on it. I'm like, okay, all right, go smear your shit.
But how would you? You wouldn't want to clean the shit in that corner? You would just move on and keep living in that room that has shit in the corner? You'd want to clean it up. You're smearing it. I'm not smearing it. I'm trying to get rid of this shit.
You're spreading. Ironically, you're spreading it by trying to get rid of it. You're like, I thought that if I pushed it around, it would thin it out, but instead it just keeps spreading it. Yeah.
Listen, let's say you put somebody in charge of pet sitting. You were going away. You put them in charge. They kill your pet, right? And you say, oh, you just move forward. But then 10 years later, 20 years later, there's a little bit of evidence comes out that maybe they did something to your pet, right? Yeah. Are you going to be like, well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, it's time to move forward? Or are you going to be like, no, I appear to have uncovered something. I need to figure it out in full. Are you really just going to
Depends on how much. I have a response for that. It depends on A, how much time of my life it's going to take to uncover it, and B, there's sort of a reason why that in religion they just kind of, I know a lot of people think that that's the problem with religion, is that they have this idea of like, we can't sort out everything. You have to let God sort it out kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Because it eats you alive and you lose your life. You waste your life. And I don't want to waste my life. Yes, it's a tragedy. Yes, they killed my dog. If I can get some quick and handy justice, then I'll take care of it. But if I can't, I don't want that to define the rest of my life, that this event now has completely engulfed my life. How about that?
I see what you're saying. And I haven't gone down this JFK rabbit hole really, and I wouldn't want to go too much further because I could see it engulfing my life. But when I did go down that rabbit hole today, I understood it. I felt the power. I was like, ooh, but what about this? What about that? So I see how easily it happens, for sure.
Sure. You love yourself a rabbit. You love to chase them rabbits. Well, go for it. Chase a rabbit. But then again, don't say, hey, how come nobody wants to come join me and chase some rabbits? I'm like, because I like it up here where the sun is shining.
Yeah, I get it. In denial land. Yeah, you're just...
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Denial is a river in Egypt, Alex.
Yeah, but also when you're in the sunshine, sometimes you can through the power of positivity, you can then make up for the negativity versus going chasing the negativity.
Do you know who else was in the sunshine? JFK on the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, and the rain had just stopped, and that's why they took the dome off the car. They had a dome on earlier in the day. If it had kept raining, he might still be alive.
In other words, So in other words, this is good. So in other words, the CIA also was in control of the weather, because otherwise, how could they have perfectly timed it for it to happen if the dome was on? Oh, you're right. You know what? You're right. It is a good theory.
You think the CIA can't control the weather? You've been smoking too much wacky tobacco, Alex.
Do you know that I feel sorry for you now, DJ, as I feel sorry for many like you. Mm-hmm. I can only pray for you, because I'm not going to spend all my time talking to you about this, because the fact of the matter is, I think we've already overextended our time. We probably are almost done, aren't we?
I enjoyed this conversation. I think it's the most we've disagreed, but not even disagreed about the subject matter, but how much we care about it and how much we would like to know the answers to it. So a very interesting documentary. Honestly, I love that we get into all this different stuff every week. One week we're looking at people tickling. One week we're looking at assassinations of important, American leaders. It's a very diverse group of subjects we're going down. And with that in mind, what are we talking about next week?
Well, this is my choice. It's The Donut Kid.
Yeah,
because for God's sake, let's just hear what the story of a guy who made donuts has to say.
But
What's that all about?
I will say we thought Tickled was going to be a nice light journey and a break from the darkness.
This is going to be probably terrible. By the way, when I hear about these through some recommendations, I do no research. I go in fresh. And we'll see how this one plays out.
Me too. I was so surprised when we watched the documentary this week. I was like, President Kennedy was assassinated?
Anyway, so that's all for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this rousing debate in which I was sensible and DJ couldn't let go.
Do your homework, people. It goes deeper than you think. I'm DJ.
Have an apple. I'm Alex.
See you later, guys.